The Honourable Ian Liddel Grainger, first elected as a Conservative Party member of the British Parliament in 2001, he is serving in his 20th consecutive year. From education to energy, taxation to healthcare, to support for those with dyslexia and learning disabilities, Ian Liddel Grainger is a tireless advocate for his constituency of Bridgewater and West Somerset, and for Britain as well. A skilled negotiator, Mr. Liddel Grainger has represented the British government on numerous European and NATO commissions, addressing matters of multilateral cooperation. Ian Liddel Grainger seeks solutions and knows that complex problems demand compromise. He created and chairs all-party parliamentary groups on nuclear energy, pharmaceuticals, energy studies, and tax policy. Mr. Liddel Grainger served in the British Army, where he rose to the rank of Major. Little known is that our next speaker is the great-great-great-grandson of Queen Victoria, and the first in the Queen's lineage to be elected to the British Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome an effective leader, legislator, and advocate, the Honourable Ian Liddel Grainger.
Hello, lunchtime Washington. Jerry, it's a privilege to follow you. It's been too long since we've seen each other, and may I say, you're looking very well. But at Edge 2021, this is a remarkable time, because you're going to be wondering in Vegas and Washington, what on earth are me and Helen doing in a bunker below the Foreign Office in the middle of London, surrounded by switches? Well, actually, I'll come on to why we're here, but this is not, as somebody suggested, just to make sure that the President Biden, if anything happens to his ticker, we can quickly flip the switch and he jumps up into life again. This is very much the heart in 1940, and this is the way of looking at this. In 1940, when everything had gone wrong, Britain was standing alone. The Nazis had got right through France, and we were just there. We were being bombed day in, day out. And here, in this bunker, is where Churchill ran the war from, before America came in 41, and before the Russians were invaded. This was where it happened, and this is the plant room here, below the Foreign Office. And I think that's poignant, because if you think about it, we were almost in wartime conditions 2 years ago. If you'd said to me 3 years ago, we would be in lockdown, the world would change out of all recognition 2 years ago, I'd have said, like most people, don't be ridiculous. It just isn't going to happen. And I think the lessons we learned 70 years ago were quite simply, there is nothing more powerful than people who are determined to get out of a situation. And you know what has really amazed me in the last, well, 2 years, is that the corporate world, regardless of where we look, regardless which country, decided that it could, within months, literally months of this pandemic appearing, create a vaccine. That's just unheard of. It's not parallel anywhere that you can do this. But the companies around the world said, yeah, we can do this. We can make this happen. And it's a lesson to us all, because every year we have a flu pandemic. It affects the world. Many, many millions die. And we just think of that happens. But nobody had ever seen anything like this since the plague, which is back in the 1500s. What we did was we changed the world, and we changed the way the world looks at itself. Because corporate world not only created those vaccines, but they're getting them across the world. And if you look at the people who have been given the vaccine, it's millions upon millions upon millions. That is incredible. That is a supply chain second to none. That is research second to none. That is governance across the world second to none. And what I think has impressed all of us, regardless of where we are, is the world can look now with hope. Britain takes the shackles off on Monday, the 19th. America is already going through that. The European bloc is coming out in various forms. We have moved 1 million miles. But I think what has been equally as impressive is the way, as Jerry has very beautifully put, is that economically, right around the world, we've stepped up to the mark. We've had to furlough, in other words, give money to millions of workers. We've had to change our legislation. We've had to change our democracies. We've had to be much more draconian in areas which none of us feel comfortable with. But we had to do it. And we had to do it in a way that only wartime would do. And that is why, if you look at what's happened, that you see that we have cared for millions and millions of people, from the most humble people who know that they have got a long challenge ahead, to people who have been very well looked after but then lost their jobs. Then we all end up in the same bathtub, for want of a better word, floating around. And you've got to look after everybody, because as we come out of this pandemic, we have to kickstart all our economies right across the world, from the smallest island in the Pacific to the greatest nations on earth. Every single one of us has a responsibility for kicking those economies up again, picking them up, moving on. But it's not always the role of government as well. I look at our own government here in the United Kingdom, of which I'm a member of that government, and you say, well, would government have done it as well as corporate world? No, I don't think they would. The point has been that government should set out policy. The corporate world can actually cut through all that and get to the quick very much faster than we can. And what has been really impressive is the way that science, government, and research has worked hand in glove right across the world. And that is quite incredible. But it's also been keeping everybody going, has been keeping the levers, the wheels of power going. My own situation, my district, my constituency, we have a nuclear power station which we are building. We couldn't stop. You can't stop pouring cement in a nuclear power station because it doesn't work. So we had to keep that going in the height of the pandemic, and people said, we're never going to do it. We did it. That indomitable spirit by EDF Energy of France, along with the British and everyone else, have made it work. And that's just one example. The other example I'd use, not just in my constituency, but across Britain, is the supply chain, the logistic chain, to keep food flowing, to keep medicines flowing, to keep everything that we hold dear in our lives, electricity, water, sewage, dare I say it, broadband, everything going. And that is the most remarkable thing. And you saw it in the film when we started, that people are out there day in, day out, masked up, doing their job, fighting on, making sure that everything we hold dear keeps going, because that at the end of the day is what the human spirit is about. But you know, it is interesting to note also, in this time, over the last year and a half, we have still suffered, and Helen and me were talking about this, cyber attacks from countries not so far from my own, where they are still causing us trouble right across the world, where we are seeing governments and organizations putting out ransomware, holding us to account, making our lives more difficult. And you wonder what it is about people in countries that will attack healthcare systems or try to bring areas that you desperately need down to make millions of euros or dollars, or just out of malicious horror to do damage. And the world must be careful about this, because this is not going to change. And one of the things about Edge 2021 is looking at the future, how we can work together to fight back against organizations and countries who want to undermine our democracy, who want to undermine our governance, who want to undermine our states, and make sure that we do not allow that to happen. All of us are living in a changing world, and it's maybe getting faster than slower. But to that end, we have to be vigilant, because at every stage, you know, in Vegas and Washington, as well as I know here in London and in France, in Paris, that our democracies are worth fighting for. I'm standing in a bunker where Churchill fought for democracy, stood up for democracy against tyranny of the very worst type. And that is not a great parallel in the sense that a pandemic doesn't respect borders, it doesn't respect people, it doesn't respect anything. It just respects its ability to reproduce and move on. But I think also we must spare a thought for the countries around the world that will find it more difficult to get the vaccines, tiny countries which are going to be down the food chain and who will find it hard to do that. But if we don't help them, then they will inevitably have the problems of variants, as we're seeing from India and other places, where this thing mutates, and we need to be vigilant on that. And again, Jerry was saying how the American government and the American economies have stepped up to be able to help other countries and also make sure that we respect that we've got to make that extra step forward to get that vaccine and get those things out to people that can't help themselves always and who need our help. But I want to just come back to our economy, because Jerry put it very well. We don't have the IRS in this country. We have Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. And their responsibility has been to make sure, through the Chancellor of the Exchequer, whose office is next door, to make sure that we keep everybody we can either employed or they're not taking all they need in unemployment benefits. In other words, people, we called it furloughed, and they meant that they were getting 80% of their wages and their companies paid 20%. And it has been blisteringly successful. And if you look at where we've got with tax take and also with the way the British economy is going, both sides, both parts of that, are shooting up. They are making huge increases upwards. And we're looking very good for the next couple of years. And that is thanks to this enormous team effort across not only the political divide here in the United Kingdom, but utilizing all businesses, the people that really make it work, which is commerce. A Frenchman, Napoleon, once said that Britain was the nation of small shopkeepers. I think he was probably right. That we do pride ourselves on small entrepreneurs growing into great things. And we look across the pond to you guys in Vegas and Washington and say, well, maybe that's the epitome of it, the American dream. And that has been incredibly successful. We look at your economy, and that's where we all aspire, to see ourselves moving forward. But I think what has also shown us this time around is how important nationhood is. The reason the British left Europe may be something slightly to do that we see nationhood in a different way to Europeans. And I think that if I'd urge again to say, when should we have left Europe? And it's a difficult one to call. Maybe it was now, when a nation needs to stand up and be counted as one. In the film you just saw of me, which was somewhat unflattering with the photographs, I can show you, I've hopefully lost weight, was that we have changed. Scotland has a parliament, Northern Ireland has an assembly, and so does Wales. But we work together, and it has, with some bumps, been successful. This is a partnership that's lasted 300 years, but the nation is still proud. We are still the United Kingdom. And I think that's important, that's worth remembering, that our future as a nation, and a nation of people, has shown that actually together we are incredibly strong, as America has the individual countries of Europe has. South America and Asia has shown this. And in Africa, where the challenges have been much more extreme, are showing that nations matter, and nations stand together are very, very powerful. But I suppose this brings me back to where I started with this bunker, that in every district and constituency across Britain, we've had to hunker down. We've had to do a lot of work with people who, in their own worlds, have had them shaken to the core, where they've lost loved ones, relatives, friends, where long COVID, which is what we call here, which is the awful things that COVID does to your lungs and other parts of your body, are being lived with every day. And you heard how many deaths we've had here in Britain, over 100,000. It has been a very tough time, but people have been incredible. I've seen the best of people that I never thought I'd see, and probably never expected to see, where people have looked after their neighbours, looked after their communities, looked after their regions or areas, where people have taken on massive responsibilities, and not young or old or disabled or healthy, whatever, it's just everybody. We've worked together to do that. And what I think has been the most impressive thing is the way that we've applauded each other to get on with it. In this country, we have a National Health Service, which I think is 70 years old this year or last year. And that has been incredible. The Prime Minister and Her Majesty the Queen have given it the George Medal, which is one of the highest awards the United Kingdom can give. I think the last time it was given to Malta, when our German friends were bombing the devil out of it, and they stood alone again, being bombed every day, and they held out. And again, the NHS has done the same. It has held out. It has kept everybody going. It has made sure that we've all looked after each other. And the healthcare system of any country, rather like this bunker, is something you get into and you fight back. And it has done so. And some of the scenes in wards, emergency wards, we call it accident emergency, have been staggeringly incredible, where doctors and nurses have kept going 24 hours a day to keep people alive, keep people's families, give it hope that they're going to come back to them. And I think with the vaccines now, where Britain is doing really, really well with the vaccines, we really are. Millions have now had the second jab. I've had my second jab, and it is fabulous how we're getting on. But the future for all of us, and the future that we aspire to, is that collaborative working across the world. And I'm not sure anymore that the United Nations is quite the right vehicle. I think as nations we can do really much better. Maybe the UN can metamorphosize into this. But it is that ability of the nation to talk to another nation. And what has staggered me, because I'm, as you said, part of the Commonwealth, which is 54 countries around the world, we've been talking to each other continuously, much more than we perhaps would have done, because we used to visit. Now, thanks to Zoom and thanks to Kudo and all those other wonderful mediums, we've had numerous conversations and they've been brilliant. So we've learned from each other. Last week I had a great meeting with the Canadians. And a couple of weeks ago I spoke to the Canadian speaker, who was fabulous. And we had a long chat about things we've got to do and what Prime Minister Trudeau was doing. And it made a huge difference to all of us. But you know, in the end, and this is what I'd say to Dawn and everybody, Edge 21 does matter, because we've got to talk. I have so many friends that I'd love to be with in Vegas and Washington, and I can't be with you because of this. But I am there in spirit, and I really am so proud that we've been given a chance in London, and Helen and myself have been able to speak to you breakfast time, lunchtime, here at tea time, and I've just put down my cup of tea before we came on air, is to say thank you for everything you do and everything you are doing. And that's why I want to reach out to people like Steve Ryan and people like that who just have done such wonders for America and many others. So can I just say thank you to Edge 21, to all our friends everywhere around the world, and to all the people that we've all been privileged to work with and touch. And to Jerry, you're a hell of an act to follow, Jerry, but bless you. So thank you from London. Thank you all. God bless you all.